In this video, we're going to be looking at how Silicon Valley methodology and an agile mindset that is used a lot in startups, but also in very big corporations, can improve your music production and how you can get to better results much faster, to create much faster. And I have a background both in sound engineering, and I was a Scrum Master and worked a lot in agile frameworks with software development teams. And through that work, I realized that there were principles there that I could apply to music production to become much more efficient in the studio and actually enjoy the process way more. And out of that, Rapid Flow was born and the Rapid Flow template. So my recommendation to you would be to use the similar systems that startups and big corporations have been using based on agile principles and an agile methodology to create much faster. This video is not going to be a plug for my template or my company or anything like that, because this is something you can apply to any DAW, any template that you can make yourself. This is really much more about why I think this is so important to apply this as a musician. I ran a poll on Reddit where I asked, or in the end 600 musicians answered, like, what's the things you struggle with most for music production? And the top three was finding time to make music, finishing tracks, and mixing and mastering. Now obviously finding time to make music implies that if you're in the studio, if you finally manage to get that time together, that time better be well spent, because it's going to be tough to finish tracks if every track takes like 2 months. Like it's demotivating once you listen to a track for the 1000th time. And if you could do it in a week or maybe in 2-3 days, why wouldn't you, right? Without losing quality. So finding time to make music is a tough one. Mixing and mastering, I realized, was something I could help with, and something that I'll chat about a bit today, how you can solve that for yourself. And the other one was finishing tracks. And again, finishing track is something where I realized I have a really good methodology that I'm going to share with you. The whole idea behind Agile is an iterative approach. It means that pretty much any big company in the world and a lot of startups develop software and products based on Agile methodology. And what this means is that you build something really small, a so-called minimum viable product. You could call it a minimum viable, track loop, a sketch. Put that out in the market, see how people react, see what parts they like, and then build on top of that. How does this translate to the studio, to music production? If you go into the studio, and like I said before, you have limited time because you live a busy life, you have family, job, all these kinds of things, and you're going to spend 2 hours mixing a kick against a bass line before you even start making the track idea, I think that's a problem, because you're not really going to get to a point quickly where you can actually get into the creative part, which is actually the part that really matters to most people that listen to music. Of course, they want to hear a punchy, loud, fat track, but the part that gets people on the dance floor, the part that gets a track played and charted and all that kind of stuff, is the melody, the harmony, the hook, maybe a vocal, or maybe the general vibe. Like if it's really Schranz techno, then it's like it's impactful. But there's something about it that's more than just a cool loop that's kind of playing, that's all well produced. There's some feeling that's being conveyed there, or some sensation that's coming across. And I think those are the things that if we focus on them as music producers, we can very quickly get to a point where we make a track that's exciting and interesting to listen to. The way that I found to do this that is really easy and fast is to do track sketches. And the way that I do this is I'll lay out a sketch across one row in Ableton in the session view, and I'll use a controller like you see here to bring stuff in and out. And at the end, actually, I can play that one-line sketch in session view live just by fading controllers in and out on stage. But I can also use that in the studio to jam with different parts and test different things. And actually, very often, I'll do the first track sequence using the faders in order to lay out the sequence in real time. So instead of trying to lay out the track perfectly from beginning to end and kind of make it all super nice and add all this stuff in, only then to realize after 2 weeks of work, like, the core idea wasn't that strong, okay, on to the next one. You can do that in one afternoon and have something that you can play in sequence live, listen to it in the car, share it with your friends, and get feedback on it to see if it's a track that's worth actually pursuing and building out into something bigger. So that's like your minimum viable track, MVT. Or if it's like a cool idea, but yeah, it's not that amazing, on to the next one. And you can do easily, 2-3 sketches of tracks in a weekend. And that way you will actually get to a place where you will have a lot more interesting track ideas to pick from to actually build out into an EP or an album. So don't waste too much time on perfecting stuff where you're not entirely sure yet. if it's actually something worth pursuing. The other thing that is a big part of Agile is the so-called Agile Manifesto, and in it, it has something called the 12 Agile Principles. I'll link to it below if you want to dive into this. So there's one principle in the Agile Manifesto that really blew my mind and that has impacted my life very deeply since then. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. And it deeply influenced my work and my music production, and actually directly led to the Rapid Flow template, because I realized that I've spent hundreds of hours mixing kick drums and bass lines against each other every time from scratch, to the point that I really didn't enjoy it anymore. And that's why I made a template that had a bunch of great kick drums, a bunch of cool note-by-note bass lines that I could always use to build tracks out from. And eventually it got kind of so good and so big that I put it out in the world, and I realized a lot of people also got good use out of it. So the idea here is, if you're going to build yourself something that's going to reduce work and that's going to get rid of repetitive work, build yourself like your library of like kick drums and bass lines that all fit together, snares that fit to that, hi-hats that fit to that, shakers and rides and toms that all fit together in the mix, so that all that stuff is done. And when you start a new track, the basic foundation for your track can be up in like 10 minutes. If you've seen my live streams where I'm working here in the studio, I'm able to go from a blank slate where there's nothing happening to like a track groove and a vibe with kickline bass and the first harmony literally in 5 minutes. I can be there putting in the hi-hats and everything and checking how these things work together and see if the melody or the harmony catches me. And I would highly recommend that you find a way to reduce the work that you do over and over and over again, and that you focus your attention and your energy, especially if you're someone that has limited time to make music, which is most of us. Focus your energy and time spent on the stuff that really makes a difference, and be conscious about where you spend your time. So the other part that I can recommend, and this is also a big part of Agile, is called empiricism, which means basing your decisions on things that you can prove, that you know, that are clear beyond the doubt. So in my case, the way that works is that I have a mastering chain that is pretty complex and has everything running through it all the time from the very beginning of when I start a track. I mix into like a mix bus processing setup, because when I then play the finished track sketch, it's already at the loudness and EQ'd and stereo width and all that stuff. It's already there, so I'll know exactly what this track is going to sound like once I remove that stuff and send it to a mastering engineer. When I get it back, it's not going to be hugely off, the whole mix and everything. And if you've ever made a track without anything on the bus and then put a limiter and maybe some compression and EQ, you'll know how hugely your mix can change through that process. So I like to mix into a mastering chain and know exactly what I'm going to get. And of course, I do remove it if I'm sending it for mastering, but already many of the decisions that need to be taken in order to get to a good loud master are done in the mix, because I'm in essence hearing it in real time and getting feedback in real time by mixing into the mastering chain. A little side note here on something that I think is so essential, where you can just get so much faster in the studio, is actually what you see right there. Those are shortcuts for Ableton that I just have set up on one of my screens. And if ever I'm like, oh yeah, what was that again? All I have to do is go to desktop and I'll see the shortcuts, and I'll be able to integrate that into my way of working much faster. And a lot of my workflow these days is based on shortcuts. So if you haven't already, grab that over on rapidflow.shop. It's under the free thing in the menu. We have it for Ableton, Bitwig, FL Studio, and Logic, and there's even some shortcuts there that are not documented by Ableton that I've dug out over the years. There's a super cool one which you can show and hide all third-party plugins just with one click. So let's summarize this, hopefully, so that if this was a bit of a rant, it makes a bit more sense and kind of comes together. My recommendation to you would be to use Agile principles and an Agile methodology to create much faster, and building yourself a library of sounds that you love, that you can always rely on to start tracks with, and then add the stuff that's unique. The second thing is to be super conscious and focus on the stuff that delivers the maximum, the biggest value, which I think is the things like the melodies, the chords, the harmonies, the vocals, or or, you know, the things that people really hook into when they're listening to music. So focus, prioritize the stuff that makes the biggest impact, which is exactly also what agile teams do. The third one would be to leverage stuff that's proven, that works well. So if you have access to a great mastering chain or a really solid, like, you know, all-in-one limiter or whatever it is that helps you to get ahead faster, definitely use that kind of stuff so that you take out a lot of the guesswork. Yeah, and then finally, you know, and the biggest one, I think, to reduce work to the maximum. Look at your music creation process and see which are the parts that you catch yourself doing over and over and over again to get to actually kind of the same result. And I think the best example is mixing a kick and bass against each other, or low cutting a pad. These are some suggestions and actually, yeah, some of the things that we apply in the way that we work and the workflow that we teach people who start using the Rapid Flow template. So I think the core idea here is try to get the most out of the time that you spend in the studio so that you can get to good results, so that you actually also have more fun in the studio, because, you know, mixing something for hours and hours and hours until it finally sounds right can be boring and kind of demotivating. And just generally finish more music and have more time to just, you know, enjoy the process rather than getting stuck in all the nitty-gritty details that don't necessarily deliver that much value or that much inspiration from a music making point of view. Okay, so I know this is pretty niche. I'm very curious how many people are going to tune into this, but working in this way has been a huge revelation for me on all fronts, also in music production. That's why I wanted to share with you about this. I hope that this was interesting for you. If you want to dive deeper into this, a lot of the stuff we do at Rapid Flow is based on this approach. Of course, we have the Rapid Flow template and Infinity Bundle with which you can achieve this very, very quickly if you want to experiment with it. But yeah, you can also just build your own and you know, and get to those kinds of results quicker. So yes, I hope you have a great time in the studio. Please subscribe and like and share and all that stuff if this video was useful to you, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.